terms of getting her support to make sure that Oakland continues to provide public safety and have the support necessary from our police department. So we seek immediate resolution for the city of Oakland and the residents to move forward. Thank you.
Switch places, please, with Chief Jordan.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Councilman. Thank you for your remarks.
Good morning. It's been a while since I've seen many of you. However, I'm here today to reiterate my position, which I've consistently made over the last 6 years. It is time for Robert Warshaw to be fired from his position as the police monitor in the city of Oakland. OPD is in a perpetual state of non-compliance due to a lack of accountability from a person responsible for overseeing reform, Robert Warshaw. Warshaw's job is to police the police, but he has no oversight, no one has held him accountable, and he has made a career and millions of dollars on the backs of the residents of Oakland. We are now beginning to see the effects of some of his draconian policies, where officers are now being required to go out of service in order to complete a simple use of force report, leaving calls for service standing for hours. This is unacceptable, and it should be unacceptable to the residents of Oakland, who will ultimately pay the price for this long-standing, outdated monitoring system. The current monitoring system in place at OPD is fraught with inherent risk of conflict. How can a person responsible for providing technical assistance to the department to assist them in getting into compliance be also responsible for determining if and when the department is in substantial compliance with the settlement agreement? This is akin to the fox guarding the henhouse. It is time for Robert Warshaw to be fired from his position as the monitor of the Oakland Police Department. Since retiring from OPD over 7 years ago, I've had the opportunity to evaluate many other departments' policies and procedures, both locally and nationally. It's my belief that OPD's current policies and procedures should be held as a model policies for their accountability and their transparency and for bringing safety and security to the residents of Oakland. Thank you.
Well, good morning, and I do also want to tell you that it's just a real honor to sit here next to Chief Jordan, who has a fantastic reputation in the Oakland Police Department. And again, I thank you as well, Councilmember Gallo, for your leadership, your support, and it has also been a tremendous honor for me to be the Chief of Police of Oakland. This is, in my opinion, and so many others, that the Oakland Police Department is the finest police department in this country, because they indeed did change. They did reform, and they deserve the honor and recognition that they have been denied. I started policing 38 years ago, and during that time period, I always have tried to deal with concerns associated with inappropriate behavior or conduct, and at times even illegal employment issues have come up. I have always dealt with them behind closed doors in my 38 years. In these past 3 years, there were significant concerns that I had regarding inappropriate behavior and at times illegal employment conduct. Again, I was true to the principles I believed in and tried to deal with these matters behind closed doors by bringing my concerns to the city through appropriate channels. It is unfortunate that that could not be dealt with to resolution behind closed doors. Therefore, these matters are definitely matters, there are two, of public concern. I did weigh my legal options. I am not one who thinks that you settle everything through legal routes. But I will tell you that today I have made that decision. I am going to have to go forward through legal action, and I am retaining John Kecker and his law firm to represent me on future issues associated with that matter of public concern. I had been gravely concerned about the behavior of the police commission and had been reporting it, as I said, through appropriate channels. With respect to the second matter of public concern, it does have to do with the federal monitor and the federal monitoring oversight. I am a believer in reform. I do believe there are times and places and certain agencies that need federal intervention and federal oversight. So coming to Oakland was not of concern to me, and I knew that because of historical events that occurred, Oakland was going to be one of those agencies who years ago did need the federal intervention. I also believed in Robert Warshaw. I knew that there was a reputation that he was in it just for the money, but I took him at face value. I supported and championed him internally among those who had already come to the conclusion that he was in it for the money. I accepted some of his mentorship, which to this day I still appreciate. However, it is unfortunate that I say to you today that I no longer believe the reform efforts had progressed, but I came to wonder who is monitoring the monitor. I think highly of the federal judge who is assigned to this case. I respect him. I find him to be honorable. But like the rest of us, his expert is Robert Warshaw. So what Robert Warshaw says to the judge, it would be difficult to combat that. That is why in the past year we have been asking the judge to personally come down to the police department. See for yourself the things that we are doing. And he has taken us up on a couple of those events. I also appreciated that the judge would say that this is not just about checking off boxes, but part of reform is checking off of boxes. But the end issue at hand was that the police department, the Oakland Police Department, has culturally changed. Not just reformation, but transformation. And what disturbs me the most is that when you realize that a reform process has been adulterated, the rank and file no longer believes. And you will never get culture change unless you believe in those changes. And these hypocrisies have halted and stunted all the progress that was being made. And because of that, I did go to Washington, D.C. In the spring. I spoke and took my concerns to the people who I thought could deal with that. Since my termination, I have made a call to our local U.S. Attorney's Office. I will go to whoever and whomever I need to speak to say what these concerns are. And intervention from outside the Department of Justice needs to come in.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chief. Thank you, Chief Kirkpatrick. Thank you, Chief Jordan. Thank you, Councilman Gallo. Any questions?
I have a question in regards to the specific termination lawsuit. what exactly are you suing for? Wrongful termination?
There are going to be several causes of action, and the attorneys are preparing that as we speak.
When you said something about the illegal employment,
There are times,
Look forward.
yeah, I'm sorry. There are times that remarks may have been made through the years where, you know, they're illegal in and of themselves, maybe comments of gender or race or issues like that. Not everything has to be taken into a formal lawsuit because they can be dealt with. There are times, particularly when illegal actions along the lines of retaliation, along the lines of indeed gender or age or race, that it's just so egregious it cannot really be dealt with in a closed door way where you get a corrective action. So that's what I was referencing when you made questions regarding technical legal employment violations.
What are the hypocrisies that have stunted the progress?
The hypocrisies are that we have really tried to establish in the Oakland Police Department values such as procedural justice, giving voice to people, making decisions without bias, this type of the pillars of procedural justice, understanding that the changes in the new policies are designed for risk management and to support new progressive ways of thinking. And when rank and file and the chief says, you're not practicing these principles, city, federal monitor, police commission, it becomes hypocritical. And when you are a hypocrite in what you do not believe. And unless you believe, you will not get to true culture change. The way you get to a culture change is changing a heart and a mind. And hypocrisy will always stunt that.
So,
You
I
said
have a
you-
question. So the NSA is a mutually agreed, data-driven document, and so are you saying that the federal monitor, Warshaw, is actively doing things to that that aren't like legal, or
No,
you
no,
saying
no.
that you have some data to say specifically that OPD has been in compliance, but he's done something nefarious, if you will?
I am not saying he is nefarious, and I want to be clear with that. I'm not saying he's illegal. What I am saying is that the goal line changes. Not all of the tasks do have metrics assigned to them. And we have been asking, what is it that you need to see to get us into compliance on this particular task? Tell us what it is. Some of the tasks do have metrics. But in the end, he's the one who controls them. So he can just say that we can add new tasks. So what we're saying, and I think Chief Jordan can confirm, is those goal lines change all the time.
But
Yeah,
one more, if I
can
can
I-
follow up with, real quick. But you are saying, though, you're saying that he's not doing anything illegal, but you are alleging, or definitely taking a shot at his integrity by saying he's basically moving the goalposts, and the motivation is money.
That's
Right.
what I have come to believe. And I did not come to the table believing that, but I have come to believe it. And I gave an example before where I was trying to implement a new way of approaching reviews of use of force by using outside experts. And he reneged on our ability to go forward. Why? Why would you not want a transparent approach by using outsiders? That was when I started to realize, oh, that's as progressive as you get, trying to be transparent and not being allowed to go forward with that is telltale to me.
Can I just respond to your comment too? So I became a police officer in Oakland on August 1st, 1988, and when I left on August 1st, 2013, even till today, I can tell you that the department is not the same department it was when I walked in the door, okay? And because of some of the changes that have been made during the settlement agreement, I believe that we're a better department than we were in 1988. Keeping that in mind, some of the requirements that Warshaw has placed has been very, very negative towards the police department. I remember having a meeting with him and my staff. It was probably around 2011, and I try to remember the exact date so I can be accurate. And we had been asking for some assistance in terms of one of the tasks about getting into compliance, and he held us out of compliance. And we asked him, we said, hey, what do we need to do in order to get into compliance? Give us some specific examples. And his response was, and I have witnesses, keep persevering. Well, that doesn't help me, okay? What does that mean? We try to get specific direction from him, since he was the compliance director and the monitor. Well, tell us what we need to do. We made a spreadsheet, a matrix of checking the boxes and all the things that we've been doing, and we're still out of compliance with this particular task. So that's the kind of example that was rampant throughout my tenure in the department, working with Warshaw and his team in terms of getting technical assistance, which is what he's required to do as the compliance director. The order says that he will provide technical assistance to the department, and we never got it. And I don't think they got it today, because that's why we're here where we are right now.
Chief Kirkpatrick, as far as any lawsuit, would you have named as defendant, or will you name individual members of the police commission and Mayor Schaff?
I am going to follow the counsel and the lead of Mr. Kecker and his team, and I will do what he thinks is best regarding that.
Chief, you said you were concerned about the behavior of the police commission. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I think you can look at the videos themselves. All of those meetings are on tape. I have said a number of times to my own staff, do not role model this type of rude behavior. If you role model the type of behavior that they have demonstrated in a public forum, then I would be having officers investigated on an internal affairs complaint for rudeness. That's just an example. There have been occasions when there have been explicit, biased remarks made. I remember when the public defender came in October 10th. I believe it was the October 10th. Maybe it was March. It had to be March. You can look at it. Go back and look at the March event. Darwin Bond Graham tweeted that event, in which a very explicitly racially biased remark was made and directed at the public defender. Again, that is one example in which you didn't hear anything from me. I didn't call anybody out in a public forum, but I wrote it up and sent it to the city and said, this is unacceptable. Here we talk about our own officers, training them on issues of implicit and explicit bias, but I got a police commission up here engaging in these behaviors.
So it's the commissioner who made that remark, not a member of the public, not public.
No, it's a commissioner who made the remark. It's just one of several examples that I started to have to ask the city, please intervene, please do something. And it hasn't been corrected, and so we'll just have to go from there. And again, I have tried to manage these issues behind closed doors, because I think for the most part, many things can be handled there, but they are also matters of public concern. So for instance, I do want to go back to Chief Warshaw. Do you know how he bills? His billing is in a lump sum. I do think, and it's a court order, the city of Oakland receives once a month a court order that says you will pay Warshaw and Associates X amount of money, it's a lump sum, and you will pay the compliance director X amount of money, it's a lump sum. But the citizens of Oakland should have a right to itemize. What hotels does he stay in? This type of thing. Those bills are itemized to Maricopa County, where he is the federal monitor. citizens of Oakland should be asking about itemization.
What can you say? I know Jim, sorry, go ahead. You have an answer.
Let's see, Chief, since Thomas Frazier was fired as compliance director, have you or anyone with OPD requested to the judge that there be another compliance director put in place since Warshaw's held both positions?
I have not asked the judge personally. There have been 2 judges since I have been here. So remember, there have been 10 chiefs, 4 mayors, 2 judges, 2 monitoring teams. Something's wrong. And the patterns are the same, at least under Chief Warshaw. The patterns are, there's definitely a pattern there. So think about it. With my firing, you got to get another chief, right? So if you got to have another chief, that's going to take 6 months to get another chief, possibly 3, whatever. Then they've got to have their startup time. So of course Chief Warshaw is going to need to stay because you got to have another chief. You got to make sure everything's stabilized, right? So every time you have these patterns, you get to extend how long maybe you need a federal monitor because the seats on the deck keep shifting. And you can't just leave. You got to come in and make sure everything's stable. These are patterns.
Two questions. First of all, you guys talked about having the Justice Department or the
Yes.
federal level coming in. What would that model look like to you?
Well, that's
if that is successful in terms of that request.
Well, do understand that this particular reform oversight is the unique one. When you're looking at federal oversight in New Orleans, in Seattle, in other cities, those are DOJ oversights. So your plaintiff's attorneys are not incentivized with money. We have plaintiff's attorneys who also make money. So what you're saying is a DOJ is government. They're not incentivized financially. The federal monitoring teams are a niche business. There's a group of retired people who go around and they try to get the federal monitoring contracts. So we're the animal that's unique.
And Chief recognizes that you probably have to hold your tongue when you were there and same with Chief Jordan. The next chief, if there is a chief who is willing to come to Oakland, would he or she be willing to speak out that in the same way you can now? And as some critics have said, why didn't you speak up when you were there?
You can't.
Why would you? The federal monitor has firing authority over you. So if you're critical of the federal monitor, you could be terminated. Now, it had been my desire, my goal, and what I was working toward before my termination was that your next chief would be internal. I was trying to mentor, train, develop, so that your next chief is not an outsider, that it is an insider, that takes over the best police department in this country from the inside as well. That's what I would hope. Chief Jordan is an example of that. He grew up through the ranks. He took over a great police department. That's really the way it should be. You shouldn't have to have outsiders coming in.
Here's a hypothetical.
Henry, I want to follow up on your question. It is against the law and policy for any person, any active duty person, to publicly criticize the settlement agreement or the monitor. Okay?
It's a policy.
It's a policy issue, and you can be held in contempt of court if you do so. I have personally been threatened with being held in contempt of court, which carries a $2,500 fine in federal court. Okay, so that's why there's no one that's active can actively participate in a public airing of their concerns. I can tell you the press conference that's happening here, my phone has been inundated with people that are supporting what we're doing today, both active and retired, because they don't have a voice. They do not. They can't.
I do want to follow up on what I was going to ask you too in terms of that second question is, I know a lot of folks have great respect for what you guys have done for the police department. There are also the critics who say, well, the reason why Warshaw's continue to work is because OPD continues to do a bad job in terms of the reform, and now you have 2 fired chiefs trying to plane and create this conspiracy theory. What do you say to the folks who are saying these are failed chiefs who are now going after someone who is monitoring the police department because they failed to do their
Yeah,
job? What do you say to those critics who have that kind of...
I can see where you would say there are 2 chiefs, but when you have 10, we got a little problem. That's the significant difference, and it's kind of music to the ears of the federal monitor for people to believe that it's just, gee, if they had done their job, we would have been in compliance, and therefore it's our fault. So let me give you an example. Let me just give you an analogy. If this was a 10th grade class that couldn't pass the test after 17 years, you gave them 10 new teachers, and they still couldn't pass the test, then do you start looking at the teachers or do you start looking at the school principal? Where does the failure lie? Especially when he has control over those policies. He has control over whether or not he gives us measurable metrics. Also realize, too, that we always have a new study we have to do. And those are directed, you got to go do a new study now. So there are a lot of vendors who make a lot of money on these studies. And so we can't get into compliance until we take 6 months to do the study and see what the outcome is. And then we'll build some new directions based on the outcome of this study. So this is a business. And I did come to it in good faith and a genuine believer and absolutely a supporter. But when you realize that it's not what you have, it's really disappointing. But the biggest thing is, the biggest concern for Oakland is your rank and file. They're looking at it. They're seeing it. And it's unfortunate.
Chief Kirkpatrick, how long into the process did you start to question Robert Warshaw? I mean, was it year 1, year 2, year 3? I mean, when was it?
It was the specific event in which I referenced, in which I tried to bring in outside experts to do the executive force review on our officer-involved shooting. He was very supportive of that. He thought it was his associate federal monitor said, oh, it's revolutionary in policing, which it really isn't, but regardless, it's very progressive. And we were set up. We got the 3 people we wanted. We made travel arrangements. We were entering into contracts. And suddenly, he pulled that back. And that was the day that I thought, something's wrong. This is transparent. This is progressive. Why would you pull that back? And that was the day that I went, something's not right.
Was that last year or 20?
It was last year.
And did
a year and a
Chief
half
Warshaw
ago.
give a reason, a stated public reason or a reason to you?
No.
And just to follow on what Chief Kirkpatrick said, that process was actually been used before in Oakland in 2009. So look at the records. It's a process that was done with the old monitors, and they supported it. So it wasn't really revolutionary, as he said. And then, if you really want to, for those the residents that are critical of us being here and speaking out, I think they need to look at Robert Warshaw's track record. Okay, where he's been. He's been in Puerto Rico, right? Look at Niagara Falls, Detroit, where he was asked to leave after the DOJ forced him out and said that the department was in compliance. He's in Maricopa County. Okay, look at all those places and see what type of impact he's had, if any, during his tenure.
He's supposed to have he is supposed to be an Oakland resident to be doing the book. I don't know if he has to be an Oakland resident, but someone has to be from Oakland to be on the team, so to speak. There is no Oakland resident in the federal monitoring team, although that's a part of the order of the contract. There's also not one person of color on his team. Where's his diversity? These are the types of things that I am referencing. Is it nefarious? No. But it's awfully hypocritical. these are the types of things we're speaking to. But with respect to some more serious concerns, I've taken those to the Department of Justice and our local U.S. Attorney. I'm not speaking about those in a public forum. That is reserved for the U.S. Attorney and or the DOJ, and all I'm doing is saying you need to be looking.
Chief Jordan, if I could just ask, considering Warshaw's background, and what do you say to folks who say Oakland Police Department chose him for that position?
I wasn't here. I didn't choose him.
No, I said Chief.
You want me to switch seats?
Can we
Sure.
please, thank you.
Sure.
We'll hear you much better. Sorry about that.
Let's consider it a proverbial hot seat. Okay. Go
He
ahead.
had such a bad reputation. Why did OPD approve him for the job?
Well, so I was there when he was approved. I was the assistant chief at the time, and he was recommended amongst. He was in the final four, and we thought that we had a very good chance of getting into compliance because most of the people on his team were former police officers, former police chiefs, people with stellar reputation. He had someone on his team that was a professor at some university back east. So we thought that he would give us a fair shot, and we looked at some of the work that he's done, which at the time in Detroit, he was still active there, and I spoke to people in Detroit, and they thought that he was very, very fair. But going forward, things changed. But again, he was one of 4 people that we had to consider, and the other 3 didn't have the resources or the experience that he represented at the time.
I do want to ask you though, I mean, there's a lot inside baseball, you know, for a lot of new residents here, talking about the NSA and the riders. I mean, I would say a good chunk of Oakland's population now has no idea what the heck the riders case is all about.
Correct.
So I want to keep it simple. How is Oakland being shortchanged when it comes to safety, when it comes to the quality of life? When you're living in Oakland, how are you being shortchanged by some of the allegations that you guys are making?
Well, I'm going to speak for my term as a police chief there. One of the things that we were always struggling, it was very difficult to be in compliance and also fight crime. Fortunately, Chief Kirkpatrick has done a great job in doing both. But when you look at some of the things that have happened over the years, where the allocation of resources was given to help us to get into compliance, the city being very cash-strapped in terms of hiring officers. When I joined the police department, we had 3 internal affairs investigators. When I left, we had 33, okay? And those are all mostly sergeants. And that was a complaint that I heard a lot because we had more people in internal affairs than we had in homicide, okay? So where's your priorities? Well, internal affairs was a big chunk of the settlement agreement. The settlement agreement has 51 tasks at the time when I was there. Of those 51 tasks, 21 of them belong to internal affairs. Okay? The settlement agreement did not cover criminal investigations and homicide. So our priorities was to get into compliance, and that's where all the resources went. I don't know what's changed since then, but I'm speaking from my experience while I was there and some of the historical information that challenges we dealt with as a police department. One of the things we also did, we sought to increase our supervisory ranks. The settlement agreement says that you can only have 1 sergeant supervising 8 officers. When I joined the department as a sergeant, I had 16 officers reporting to me. Well, in order for the department to meet those compliance standards, they had to increase the number of sergeants. And so we sought and got an increase in the budget to promote 25 or so extra sergeants. So we went from about 136 to about over 150 sergeants, right? And so, and those sergeants all ended up in internal affairs or out in the street. So those are some of the things. So people in Oakland, they were being shortchanged, but they probably didn't realize it because the department kept doing their job. We didn't complain about it.
Councilman Gallo, did you want to say
No,
something?
he's doing
Okay,
fine.
okay.
Go ahead.
If you don't mind, I'd like for maybe 2 speakers too, in terms of how residents are being affected by this. Because I think that's,
So-
when it's all said and done,
Right.
that was probably something
That's
we
what's
want
the
to-
troubling thing. So to talk about what we do today. So there are certain requirements under the reform efforts that require the supervisor, the sergeant, to spend hours sitting at a desk looking at body-worn video camera. They have to do certain mandated administrative duties. Well, if you're concerned about leadership and what's going on in the street, well, how do you do that? Because they got to sit at a desk. And so if you can't really lead your troops if you're at a desk. So these are the kind of things that the chief is referencing, and that is still going on today, is that all of these administrative mandates, now all of the extra forms that have to be filled out for use of force, for whatever it is, your officers are spending more time on administrative tasks than they are able to be out there in presence and fighting crime. And then when officers are looking at which agency do they want to be a part of, we are a paperwork agency, and we're just collecting data. Now, data is important. Everything is in balance. So I'm not an extremist. Data is important. But when you're collecting it for collecting's sake, it becomes so onerous that you don't have officers being able to be in the street. It affects your safety.
How much does it cost to have the compliance director and all that stuff? How much money is Oakland paying directly to these?
It's about $100,000 a month, and then all the other vendors that we go into contract for the required data systems, for the required, like under the mandate now, we have to have a data manager. So now you got to go create a budget to go hire a new person. Contracts on studies that have to do with things that occurred 7 years ago, 10 years ago. Well, how informed, but we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on our studies and on our contracts that we have to engage in. And Chief Warshaw has to approve all the contracts.
And how much
So
is
there's a
Warshaw's-
control over that.
How much is Warshaw's contract every month? Monthly average?
It's about 100,000
Just for
well, that's his association, that's his company. Okay, so it's his company, and that's about 100,000 between his monitor fee and his compliance fee, because he wears two hats.
So would you say, at this point, it sounds like you guys are all agreeing that OPD no longer needs federal monitoring, and that the NSA is like an archaic document?
It's not archaic. However, if you benchmark this, which Chief Jordan referenced, I think you would be surprised to see just how progressive we are in comparison to other cities that are also considered progressive. In the law enforcement community nationally, Oakland is viewed as, if you want to learn how to do crowd control, go see Oakland. If you want to know how to do risk management, go see Oakland. So we are known to be progressive, and yet we're still under reform or oversight.
Having said that, how do you explain to people who would say, in the wake of 2003 to now, there was the Celeste Guap incident that occurred while the NSA was in effect? We had this scandal at the Oakland Police Department. Well, what do you say to those who say that's a sign that the NSA reform is still very much needed?
I think that because of the Celeste Guam situation, and that occurred in 2006, I believe, 2005, 2006, because
2016.
excuse me, right, I got my date wrong there, but I know what you're talking about. That event, the officers who were involved and engaged in that behavior are not there. So the cancer that was there has been removed out of the body of the police department. The body, the majority, everyone who were officers and members of that department were horrified by that event. Did it create a fracture of trust in the community? Absolutely. Does Oakland own it? Yes. But like with any body that has a cancer in it, you cut your cancer out, you heal, and you move forward. I have in most every forum, and I'll even say it today, although I'm not officially the chief of police of Oakland, but I have apologized as the chief of Oakland to this community because that should not have occurred, and it did. But it was dealt with, and that cancer has been eradicated. And the reforms that we were doing and all the culture changes were moving along. But when people think that the values are not being held up by the city government or police commission or federal monitor, you put a big break on movement.
One or two more questions and then wrap it up.
Chief, I wonder, obviously, being the latest chief here and the most recent chief here, I just wonder, moving forward, are you planning to still be an asset in terms of to the members of and the residents of Oakland? I mean, in serving some kind of role. I just wonder, what's next for you? Are you moving back to the state of Washington, or
Yes.
have you already done it, or are you going to stay in Oakland to try to see if you can make a difference in this city?
No, I left. The mayor, when she terminated me, it was just that evening of just about to sign my lease for another year. I was at least grateful that she told me before I had signed that lease. But because of that, I did not have a place to live. So I have already returned to the state of Washington. I will always be here to support this police department in any way that I can, and to support, and I am genuine about the fact, y'all knew I didn't want to leave, and I didn't want to leave, but it's done. And I would have loved to have continued and finished it out 2 more years, have a normal, natural transition, hopefully would have convinced the judge who monitors the federal monitor. Hopefully I would have been able to show that really we were in compliance. We just needed him to come and see it and get around the federal monitor. And that's a difficult situation.
So if Chief, if the monitor's job opens up, will you take it?
No. Why? We're in compliance.
Exactly.
So if I could just, with setting aside the fact that the police commission, had a hand in you being fired.
Yes.
Do you support the police commission's having oversight over the Oakland Police Department, or do you disagree with Oakland voters who have overwhelmingly approved to give them that power?
No, many of y'all would not know this, but I was one of the champions who initiated getting citizen oversight in Spokane. They had a system there. It was not effective. I wanted to get a more effective citizen oversight. I believe in citizen oversight. I have not backed away from that position one iota. What I will say is that this particular police commission, I do not believe is the model that works for Oakland. There are several models of citizen oversight out there. Look at Chicago, look at San Francisco, look at Seattle, look at a lot of these cities that have citizen oversight. The model is what is the problem here, as well as who got selected onto this police commission. Who are the checks and balances over the people who are on the commission? But the citizens of Oakland should repeal this particular police commission, repeal it, and replace it. So if you're following kind of what I'm saying, is that I believe in citizen oversight. This model does not work for Oakland. As a matter of fact, I was sharing with a council member, if you want to terminate the police chief, you should go with the electeds who are truly elected to represent the community. The police commission does not represent the entire voice of this community, and there are no checks and balances on them. So if you want to have an appropriate model, citizen oversight of this city should be more advisory, like it is in most cities, that have a role in selecting your chief, but the termination needs to vest in the electeds who truly represent the voices of the citizenry.
Mr. Gallo, I was actually gonna just ask you your thoughts on the police commission. You know, first of all, the creation of it and how it's performed since then.
Right.
Yeah.
You wanna
So,
sit there?
sure, sure.
Noah, you were one of the co-authors of.
Yes, yes, I am. I'm one of the co-authors, and as a matter of fact, as we speak, we're going through trying to redefine in terms of what is the future role. We are going to recommend some changes to the commission in terms of the appointments, in terms of the responsibilities, but I will say from the very beginning, though, I will acknowledge that the city administration did not give them the training, the staffing necessary that it requires. So within my council, we are in discussion, preparing some changes to the commission in terms of the roles and so forth. And I know some of it has to go back to the voter in November, but that's under debate right now. But I do agree that at the very end, the city council needs to say yes or no to a police chief firing. We say yes and no to hiring. The mayor only recommends, and we have to approve not only who is being hired, but also the salary scales as well. And so that's something that the city council is working on as we speak.
Anything else? All right.
Thank
Ladies
you.
and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Councilman. It's good to see you. You know,